All right, folks. So thanks everyone for joining. So this is a continuation of our podcast series. We just recently had one with Ursula Morgenstern and John Madeline talking about um, the connection between the CISO and leadership. And I think the discussion today is going to delve into some of those topics, but also talk about how human risk management plays into that. We're here today with Darren Argyle and Flavius Plesu. Flavius obviously is the founder of OutThink, and Darren is a longtime CISO who had a hand in founding OutThink as well. I'll let the two gentlemen introduce themselves. And then we're going to talk about how OutThink came to be and some of the factors in the industry that led to the necessity of OutThink being there, as well as human risk management as an industry. So with that, let me just turn to our guests. So first off, thank you both for taking the time. I know it's different time zones for everybody right now, and you're both taking time away from other important things. So thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
And Darren, perhaps we start with you. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Levin. Appreciate the introduction. Yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, I have been a CISO. In fact, CISO 3 times now, Group CISO. So, and then my last role at Standard Chartered Bank was Group Information Security Risk Officer. So same as a CISO title, but I had risk in there and advising the board. I'm literally just on the process of transitioning out of the bank, actually. I'm moving full-time into the business that we founded in 2018, called the Cyber Leadership Institute, which is primarily focused on educating cybersecurity professionals who want to transition from a technical role to a cybersecurity executive role. So we focus on leadership, and there's huge demand for that. And now we're serving over 70 countries around the world. So very excited to move into that phase. And education has been a passion of mine. And actually, it's something that Flavius and I have shared, actually, is the people side of things, educating people to do the right thing. And I think that's become something that's become a mainstay of what I'm doing now and what I'll continue to do for the rest of my career, at least.
Excellent. Thank you. And Flavius, maybe a quick background before OutThink.
Absolutely. Hey, it's great to be here today. I could have been out cycling in Tuscany, but I chose to do this. It just shows how keen I was to be on this webinar with Darren, with you, Lev. Yeah, I've been doing cybersecurity for over 20 years now, and I was briefly a CISO at Bank of Ireland, UK. I worked for Darren previously at IHS Markit. And I stopped doing that because I got really, really passionate about solving the human challenge, which we today call cybersecurity, human risk management. And it started as an internal project. And then I think it was around 2019, I left the bank and I started out building software. I knew nothing about building a VC-backed software company, but here we are. Today we've built a software solution that customers across the world use and get value from. So really, really excited to be here today and to talk about the practice and perhaps the science. There's a bit of science to it, of human risk management. So thank you.
Excellent. All right. Cycling in Tuscany. It's definitely something you don't want to miss. I don't have anything like that keeping me from being here, but I'm not one of the guests, so we'll leave it at that. So why don't we go back and just kind of start talking about where it all began? Like, what was the initial spark or need that both of you saw when we started thinking about human risk management as a platform or as a problem to solve?
Shall I start, Flavius, and then you can jump in, because I can give you the real origin of where, where this started. So as Flavius had mentioned, he did work for me. We were working for a company, a global fintech called Market. It then became IHS Market when it merged with a large American organization, and has now been bought by S&P Global for billions. And Lance Ugler, who was the CEO, is obviously a very wealthy man on the back of that. But back in 2015, I think it might have been 2015, 2016, my memory is a little bit hazy. I was brought into Market to be a CISO at that time, their first group CISO. And relatively, I had a few people in the team, but not many. And I had to hire great people to make great progress very quickly. And we had a big agenda. The CEO at the time, Lance Ugler, was a big advocate of cybersecurity, not only from stopping breaches, but from building a brand that was going to be very successful. And he knew, which was great for me and Flavius at that time, was that cybersecurity was going to become a business advantage. So we already had a big major champion who was willing to drive what we were trying to do. So then I had to build this team, place the adverts, and I got actually recommended Flavius. Flavius came in, and I'll always remember he had this beaming smile. We walked in and we just clicked. We just got on so well. And it was even during the interview, I'd made my mind up that I wanted Flavius in the team. He was bright, super bright, actually. He's obviously a bright individual if you look at the background that he's done now. But he had this very human side to him as well, very disarming. And we just immediately got on really well. And we worked together. We obviously had the challenges of building a team and a capability. But it was quickly apparent that he just didn't want to do just the humdrum, identify just general risks and assets that need to be protected. He had a keen eye for the human element and the fact that we needed to engage people. And this really struck a chord with me because it was clear to me at that time that if we were going to make any meaningful change in Market, which became IHS Market, was that we'd have to engage top down. So we'd have to get the CEO and the board engaged in our agenda to change the culture of the organization, which can take years, by the way. We did this comedy video that the Lance agreed to do, and we remember that. You can find that online, by the way, and hugely successful, which allowed us not only to plant a message about the importance of cybersecurity, but it allowed us to hire into our team, which Flavius was part of, about 100 cybersecurity ambassadors. And that became the platform for Flavius, actually. So he had these cybersecurity ambassadors, and literally the culture program was then in Flavius's hands to start running. And we had no platform, no way to engage with users. And quite frankly, when we looked at all the education that was out there, or ways of enabling culture, and what we realized quite honestly was, even back then, was managing human risk. There was no platform that would allow you to do that at scale, that would allow you to get these feedback loops, the intelligent metrics, be able to risk profile individually and give tailored education. And the other part of the education, there was nothing in there as well about, if you're already educated to a degree, how do you allocate the appropriate education to individuals? And these were some of the things that we were playing around with. And Flavius and another friend of his as well, who I met at the time, Vadim, had mentioned, we've been speaking about. So we met in a cafe outside, and we talked about lots of brilliant ideas, sketching things up and everything else. But then at that point, I was more of a mentor to Flavius at that point as we were going through that process. And Flavius just really took this idea and ran with it, and has never stopped running with it until today, and the success that you're seeing. So I'll let Flavius continue that story from that kind of incubation idea. But hopefully I've got that about right, Flavius. But
oh, absolutely. And you know what? Actually, I was going back now in my head, and I remember when we first met, when I was interviewing, where I was sat in the room, and I remember it all. Yeah, absolutely. And I also remember you were asking me some difficult questions back then. Good boss, but asking some difficult questions. That's all good bosses too, right? I remember we had this legacy security awareness training solution in place and a phishing tool. Everyone in the industry knows this product, but that was us back in 2016, 17. And one of the things you were asking was, remember vividly, having breakfast done. I don't know, was it the fourth or the fifth or one morning, one Friday morning, you said, hey, we have 14,000 people across 70 countries. What is our human risk exposure? And I thought, well, I can tell you how many people have done the training, how many people clicked on the last phishing simulation, but what is our human risk exposure? What sort of question is that? And it stuck with me, and I kept thinking about it, and I went to find the answer, and I met these brilliant people like Professor Angela Sasse, our chief scientific advisor now at UCL. We actually met at a Bank of England event, and she was talking about some of this stuff, and slowly, I realized that playing people funny videos and phishing them once a month or once a quarter was one of the silliest things we were doing in cybersecurity. So I thought, how do we take a more risk-based, data-driven approach? And again, your mentoring, I do remember some of the questions you were asking me. Hey, if you want to start a business, I do remember when you asked, how are you going to transact the business? And I naively said,
I remember that.
We build a product, we put it up, and everyone's going to use it because it's that good. Well, of course, that's not how you do it. But anyway, it was good fun. And around 2017, I think we were the first to go out into the world and call it cybersecurity human risk management. And so it's been 7 years or so since. Yeah, good fun.
Yeah.
To what extent was like the first experiences of actually rolling something out before because what you're talking about is something where you have kind of these legacy training and phishing solutions, but then creating something new, it takes a long time. We're still here, still working on it, still perfecting it. But initially, were you ever able to get some sort of metrics around human risk exposure within the organization that you were both part of within IHS Markit?
I'll let Flavius talk about the metrics, but the one advantage that I think we had was that we were building a product from the ground up that would solve our problem. And this is the way you should always try to solve anything that you're taking to market. Think about the problem that you need to solve and own it. And in market, we just couldn't get feedback loops. We couldn't understand how well individuals were doing in their tests. We couldn't know who was the administrator of the crown jewels, and did that person fail a phishing test? Did that person also not do so well on their education? And by the way, is that person considered a high target individual because they are going to be phished? And you've got people who support the board, like secretariats or secretaries for board members themselves, system administrators. So you've got all these different roles and profiles, and you need to correlate them all together to get some meaningful data. And that's what we didn't have. And none of the platforms out there were solving that problem for us. So we had to build it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So this is what Flavius's task was at that time.
Yeah. And back then we didn't even realize the complexity of it and how important this is. Exactly what Darren said. And Lev, these days we refer to that combination of human risk factors as human risk portraits. And today we're measuring and tracking about 80 human risk factors. And when you start combining those human risk factors, Darren gave a good example there. Perhaps you combined 4, Darren, if I counted correctly.
Yeah.
There you go. That's one human risk portrait. And so when you combine them, there's up to 100 million unique human risk portraits that exist in an organization. So then you got to deliver training, guidance, and support to those individuals in the way that best resonates with their human risk portrait. And these are staggering numbers we've we've just realized how complex it is now after seeing all of these millions of users on the platform and all of these data points. And another staggering number is if you just take a 10,000 people organization, just 10,000 people, what is the probability of all of those 10,000 people sharing the exact same human risk portrait? That's another staggering number. It's 0.000001, and there's 79,999 zeros between the point and the one. So that's about how likely it is for one-size-fits-all security awareness training to work, to land with people. And now, if we would have realized these things 7 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have started. But ignorance is bliss, they say, right? So we did make a start, and we've been building this hyper-intelligence system that's able of measuring those human risk factors, behaviors, attitudes, level of access, high-risk roles, and delivering adaptive training, so taking people on unique learning and engagement pathways. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. But we didn't have that in the early days. We're playing people some videos and fishing them quarterly, as many organizations still do today. Yeah.
And I think that the other thing that was challenging, I think to some degree still challenging today for CISOs everywhere, is to be able to do reporting that's meaningful. You know, going into the boardroom, going into a committee, speaking to regulators. And what I found in all my roles is that you need to have access to data. So when people ask you questions, you need to have access to data. The only way you can do that is having a platform that does manage human risk, but does it at scale and is easy to navigate and understand, because you can get a lot of data out, but if you can't manipulate that data to give you something meaningful, then it's just a waste of money. And that was the other thing that we were trying to solve. And I know that Flavius has gone on to solve that very successfully. That was to pull the metrics out that matter, so that when you do go into a board meeting, or you do go into a committee, or you even get asked by a business leader, because this is the other fascinating thing, when you start to do this properly, you start to get a level of competition. When we've used platforms like OutThink, to some degree, not necessarily just in risk awareness, you get this competitive advantage happening between different business units. So you profile your risk in one department, in one business unit, and then you say to the other business unit, oh, what's your risk profile like? And you start to get this gamification, natural gamification happening. So gamification is another key element of this. And this is something that definitely drives engagement. But I think more importantly, it drives interest. And you need interest. And interest is super important in our business of culture. Culture is no different to what we do, by the way, in the Cyber Leadership Institute. The CISOs that we train of the future that are coming through now, their number one objective is to transform an environment's culture. You do that through tools and techniques and all sorts of things, stakeholder management, but you have to gain the interest of the people that you're trying to influence, and it starts top down. But you can't do that without meaningful data and the things that's going to resonate. And I think that's what you've done, Flavius, really well, is put together a capability and solution, quite frankly, a team that can deliver this through partners, to pull something together that's compelling, with a good story and a good narrative that resonates with people. And I think that's really important in today's environment that's complex.
Yeah, two key points, lots of good points, but two really stand out for me there. And so one was metrics for the sake of metrics. Like, who wants that? Which board member, which risk committee wants to be presented with more metrics? And so, yeah, we've seen that a lot in this space. You know, there's this talk of human risk metrics and this and that, and just lots of data. But as a CISO, you got to be able to even engage the board and tell them stories. So human risk intelligence that helps security teams be more precise and more effective. And yes, to some degree, that the same intelligence is used to show departments their own cyber performance. And it's awesome. I think that's the absolute best kind of gamification. Badges and shields and leaderboards. There's some interest, but around 6 months, people stop caring about those badges. But what people never stop caring is their own performance and how they're doing when they look left, right, their peers. Uh, no one wants to be last. Everyone wants to win. Everyone's really competitive. So that's the sort of, I think you called it natural organic gamification. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's it. You don't necessarily have to try too hard. If you produce the right reports that's meaningful, that people can understand. And by the way, I think this is one of the challenges of the cybersecurity industry. And I'll give you a really good example, not quite similar, but I'll give you the example. So when you do validation of user access, it's something that has to be done on a regular basis and super important, for securing systems. When you pull those reports from a lot of systems out there today, and you get all this list of business applications and everything else that they've got access to, they're all coded in a way they don't actually tell you what those systems are. Yet the manager of the individual who has to validate it has to determine from this list of applications that they've got access to which ones they should keep or remove when they move into the team. So as people move around organizations, they build up all these additional profiles and become a big risk to the organization. So a platform like OutThink, can look at, well, why has this person suddenly got all these levels of access when they sit in this team when none of their peers have this access? Surely that's a risk to them. And by the way, they were a system administrator. They're not a system administrator now, but they've still got the system administration access. And they're sitting in a team where it's not required. So you're a great target for a hacker because it's going to go unnoticed because you're not being monitored. But through a tool like OutThink, you can actually look at where this access is, spot what would potentially be outliers, and do something about it, rather than just relying on the manager to make a decision about whether because it's very difficult to make decisions. And by the way, that's a challenge that we have and continue to face. In the bank that I was working in, is validation of access. You have to go to the user themselves and go, do you still need all this? We could just say yes. Yeah. And then you move on. It's not very good. So that's an important aspect as well.
One of the things
it's automating. Sorry, Lev. Sorry for giving you these long answers.
No problem.
And we get excited about things here. It's really that bridging the gap between the good principles of cyber practice, like enforcing the need to know and the least privilege principles, and actually the real world. How do you actually do that in the real world? The CISO and the security team would have heard or are trying to enforce need to know and least privilege. But how about the user in this business area? In Australia, perhaps, right? How about their manager? So this is where. Very good point there. There's a popular use case amongst our customers, conditional access. Yeah, so human risk intelligence feeds into the person's personal dashboard and the manager's dashboard for their team. And when that manager is asked to go through access recertification, they can look at the level of risk, the level of access, and they now have the context, they have the intelligence, they make better decisions. And we often see people. Now they understand what we mean by least privilege, by need to know, by an elevated level of risk, and they make conscious security decisions. You don't have to wait for the security team or the CISO from the ivory tower to push down cybersecurity. Everyone now takes ownership of cybersecurity. So, yeah, it's. I think there's a lot of automation, a bit of common sense. There's a bit of automation needed. Bring all of that data together in a way that makes sense and that supports some really valuable use cases for the line manager, for the people, for the security teams. Otherwise, pen and paper spreadsheets, that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And the thing that I was going to ask here, because we're talking about a lot of feedback loops, a lot of potentially dimensions of risk data. What does that mean for the security team in terms of the staffing that you need to have in order to handle all of those feedback loops and to action all this data? Or are we talking about some sort of way to distribute that activity through the organization, and put the trust in doing the right thing with all of this data, into the business.
I'll make a start
Well,
on
what?
that, only
Yeah, go
because
ahead, Floris.
I was sitting last week with one of our CISO customers, and he was saying exactly that. Hey, if you'd have come to us and you would have said, "Yeah, I'm going to give you all of this human risk intelligence, and congratulations, you now get to do more work," we would have run in the opposite direction. But instead, what we do is we go to security teams and say, "Hey, look, we're going to take out the fluff out of security culture, out of managing the human component, which without a bit of quantification can appear to be quite fluffy. We're going to take the fluff out, and we're actually going to give you intelligence so you can be more effective and more precise in your interventions." And in an industry where everyone is painfully aware of how overstretched, overworked, under-resourced security teams are, of burnout issues, this is gold for security teams. I think, Darren,
Yeah,
you want to add something to that?
Yeah, look, I pretty much would have said something similar, to be honest with you. The burnout today is become one of the biggest challenges, actually. And I think when you say, Lev, what is the alternative to the OutThink platform? We did have an alternative, actually, because going back to market, the model that we had back then, in the absence of a platform that worked, was cybersecurity ambassadors. So we were able, but you can't rely on that, right? So we did, and by the way, cybersecurity ambassadors is still a great concept, and you should do it anyway. And we were very fortunate to have almost an army of cybersecurity ambassadors helping us across that organization. But that's never going to be scalable, and it's never going to be sustainable. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned over the last 20 years in cybersecurity, it's probably closer to 25 actually, but certainly over my recent years as a senior leader, whatever you've got to do, it's got to be scalable and it's got to be sustainable. And the only way that you'll do anything to scalable is if you introduce technology and a level of automation to do what you need to do. Again, that's what OutThink does. But the sustainability of it becomes important. In other words, the reports that you are producing are showing progress, whether it's one way or the other. And that's what you need to be able to demonstrate through the right metrics and data points that you get from the platform. Because when you go to a regulator and you say, we've just deployed these solutions, we've just deployed these capabilities, they're very interested in that and they're very grateful for you to lowering the risk to a certain degree. But actually, if that doesn't happen sustainably over a period of time, then it's never going to stick. And by the way, the only way that you ever introduce a sustainable risk posture is getting it right with the humans. That's the bit. It's the humans that deploy the solutions. It's the humans that build applications. It's the humans that change your profiles. It's the humans that spot suspicious behavior. This is why we get 90% of breaches attributed to humans because, and by the way, we, as much as possible, we want to reduce the reliance on human failure in the system. So we should not just automatically default to, oh, that's just a human error. That's not the answer, actually. The answer is we use tools like OutThink to spot these things. And then we really look at the system design and have system design thinking to design systems in a way that reduces human risk error. So this is what platforms like OutThink can do, is they can help you design better in the future. So they're not only to become a platform to spot the issues that you have today, they help you think about designing new solutions in the future because you have the data to design better. And that's a differentiator in itself. And having that ability to do that means that you'll be designing into, because we know that secure by design, secure by default is it's almost like the holy grail of cybersecurity professionals. If you get that right, you know that downstream everything's going to be less expensive, it's going to be more secure. Using a platform like OutThink, you have the opportunity to do that, to think about and design things more properly. So I don't think that was an original use case when we started, but it's quite clear when you start to look at where you've taken the platform now, Flavius, that there's an opportunity now to use that in a way that helps architects design things differently, you know.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And there's two things you alluded to both of those things. I just want to bring them to life a bit more. The burnout. Now, I don't want to go into a whole conversation about burnout. I know this is something you talk about, Darren.
yeah.
Actually, one of the experts in this space, Richard Addiscott. Richard, if you can hear me now, hello. He talks a lot about burnout and mental health and all those things. I was the other day with a very, very large bank, and they were talking about burnout. They were talking about stress. And how can you not be stressed when 90% of security breaches involve the human element, and you are not in a position to quantify human risk, and you do not know what your human risk exposure is. And when we were working together there, and you might remember we had a little incident one morning, and I had to run to the office from where I was living at the time in Tower Bridge, and I had a BlackBerry, and I kept getting messages and calls on my BlackBerry, something happening again. It was a bit of a human error there. We had an incident.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you never know when these things might happen. So if you don't know and you're not proactive, you're not able to proactively manage human risk and do the design thinking and the defense in depth and put the right compensating security controls in place where you have a large number of colleagues highly vulnerable to cyber threats. If you can't do that, then no wonder people are stressed. So we didn't build a eliminate burnout or de-stress cyber professionals platform, but it aids with that as well.
Yeah, it's like a bonus feature.
It's a bonus feature. That's right.
And it seems like burnout is definitely a topic that well, we heard about it at the Gartner Summit that we went to a couple months ago, and it resonates. Marcel here in the comments mentions burnout as well. 84% burnout in cybersecurity nowadays. I don't know how you measure that, and I want to just take the opportunity for the folks that are on the podcast with us to mention that you're welcome to submit comments or questions and kind of participate. That's why we do these things live. So anyone else that wants to throw a comment in there, please, we'll look out for that. So just want to make that announcement.
Thank you. And the second point before we continue. The second point was what Darren talked about there with system design and putting the right security controls, and of course the idea is never to just try to make people bulletproof. That's never going to happen. It's just about effectively managing and reducing the risk. So of course you're still doing the defense in depth, and you're putting the various process and technical controls on the various layers, so that when people do fail and make mistakes, we're only human. That's not the end of the day. That's not a breach. And so the human risk intelligence I talked about informs those sort of decisions, feeds into security risk assessments, and help drive better risk prioritization, and it helped drive security initiatives, part of the security program. Yeah.
Well, and informing investments. And I think that's one of the big things that a lot of organizations struggle with today is, how much do I need to spend in this space? So if you start to use a tool like Platform, you can start to get some quantifiable metrics about what's required in terms of to change the culture. And that's because culture is something that's quite seen as difficult or intangible to really measure. But if you've got data that you can start to measure, you can start looking at investment over time. And that's definitely helpful, because every time you go to the board, or particularly organizations that are very keen on funding. For example, if you go work for a retail organization that operates on very thin margins, they know the importance of cybersecurity, but are they willing to spend a lot of money on it? Not normally, retailers. So you have to be very, very keen with your funding allocations and make sure they understand the risk, and be able to quantify human risk properly is important.
Which kind of comes back to the question of the partnership between the business and the security organization. And once you start surfacing these kind of metrics, and maybe, Darren, you spoke quite well about some of the gamification, natural gamification that happens, right? When different business units or departments perhaps compete on some of the human risk metrics, or the metrics that the CISO gets to sort of steer, that matter for the security posture. What are some of the best practices perhaps that you've seen in partnering with the business to design security by using some of these feedback loops? Is that a partnership with security in the business? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so partnerships with the business have to start top down. There'll be no ability to change culture or behavior, by the way, in a business, any business unit, unless you do that top down. So you can even just remove business leaders to the side, first of all, and say, well, where does that start? It has to start with the board. That's the first place, because usually boards are the people who are responsible for culture and behavior in an organization. So you have to start there. That's the first thing. The next thing, obviously, is convincing the CEO. If you've convinced the board, you can bet that the CEO is going to be engaged, and then everything is pretty much downstream of that. But it's important that once you've got that top level engagement, which is super important, by the way, there has to be consistent follow-up. Now, this is where things like stakeholder management come in. Now, stakeholder management is largely a manual process to some degree. It's certainly using human experience. So what I would do in my examples of the CISO is I would obviously engage with the business leader directly on a one-to-one. I talk about the risk profile in their environment. I talk about their attack surface based on how they're looking to grow and all these sorts of things. So they start to get a measure. But what I want to impress upon them is the culture change that needs to happen over time. So then I'm relying on convincing them the importance of cybersecurity, because don't forget, they've got a ton of other things that they need to deal with. Once I've engaged them, I get to go to their team meeting. I get to tell them their team meeting, how important it is. And then that's when I enlist the rest of my team to continue to do that discussion and stakeholder management all the way down. Now, you can do that from a manual perspective, but it becomes a whole lot easier if you've got meaningful reports. And this is where, a platform like OutThink becomes in. Because as you go further and further down into those layers, the people that you're dealing with want to have a more deeper and deeper conversation. So if you have a platform that can bring it up to the top, the highest level, so you can have a business level conversation, that's great for me. But my team, their team, and the teams below that, they're going to want more and more detail. So you need to be able to drill down into those metrics and be able to allocate it to teams, departments, and individuals. And you'll never be able to do that without a platform that does that at scale. So that's been my experience, is that the human bit is super important. You need somebody who can communicate and convince business leaders. If you never do that, forget having a platform. You'll never make any progress anyway. But once you've done that, you're going to need a platform to take it down to the next level of layers. Because if you don't do that, people will listen to a senior leader, but they need to listen. They also need the data to take action. And that's what you need. You need the data to take the action. And that's why you need a platform that does that at scale.
The intelligence, but I guess you need, I guess what do you have, Darren? I hope I'm not going to make you blush now, but Darren is really, really good at engaging those senior business leaders. I remember with our CEO, Lance Ugla, how he was endorsing our security program. He would tell everyone, look, security for our business gives us a competitive advantage. And so he would encourage people to volunteer, to engage with us, to become security champions. And that was all, Darren's work. And not many CISOs are able to achieve something like that level of endorsement and support from the very top. And the second thing is the intelligence, indeed, because then you start engaging with the CEO's direct reports, and you get into divisions and business units. And so the CISO or the security team is going to go engage with those people. You go to those team meetings, you can't just rock up with the same PowerPoint deck. When you have the intelligence and you understand some of the challenges these people are experiencing, perhaps some of the friction points, perhaps some of the tension between business requirements and a security policy maybe, or what sort of support, what sort of conversations you should have with those people. If you can go in, if you have that intelligence in your back pocket, you go, all right, cool. So you craft your message in a way that really resonates with that audience, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the one after. And I think a combination of those factors there, Darren's charisma and communication skills and the human risk intelligence, give you some really, really good success.
And by the way, the ability to engage with stakeholders is a learned skill.
Yeah.
In fact, if I had noticed, I think we had somebody on the meeting. I think it's Andrew Fisk. Is it Andrew? Yeah, Andrew Fisk is an alumni of the Cyber Leadership Program. So one of our first alumni actually. And Andrew will probably vouch for the fact that, you know, we teach people how to become great leaders, and that the foundation of that is how to do stakeholder management really well. So that's a learned skill. So I'm not going to say and I wasn't born with it, put it that way.
No.
Any hints for? It's good to know that that's a learned skill. It's encouraging for the rest of us who perhaps still have a chance to learn that. But, you know, it sounds, and I've caught this thread with what both of you gentlemen have been talking about, the leadership at IHS Markit being completely bought into the value, the business value of security, right? And having that kind of air cover from the CEO, of course, kind of gives you the freedom and ability to build a stakeholder ambassador program and to invest your time and energy into designing security into the business. What would you say to somebody who is in, let's say, a security awareness role or a security culture role or a CISO role, who doesn't have that buy-in from their business leadership? What is there anything that they can do to kind of move that needle?
Well, 100%. And we get this a lot, by the way. This comes up a lot, Lev. So if you move to an organization where you're not charismatic or don't have the experience and don't have the air cover, then what can you do? So there's a few things that you can do. And some of the things that I always advise is try to make things personal. And I don't mean personal as in a horrible way. I mean, so they can understand it. So as a new CISO, and we talk about a 100-day plan that every CISO should have, and I actually developed my own 100-day plan whilst I was in market. But in those first 100 days, you need to find an opportunity to run some kind of security crisis simulation. That does a couple of things. One, it obviously alerts everybody to the importance of cybersecurity and what can go wrong. But the most important thing that you do in that process, you educate people. You educate the senior leaders of the organization, because at the point they realize that there is no alternative but to pay a ransom during a ransom payment in Bitcoins, because you've got no security, and that is your only option. Otherwise, your business ceases to be a going concern. Guess what? You've got their attention. Now, that doesn't happen in all cases, because don't forget, that's you doing that, the CISO. So if you feel that you don't have the confidence, then you can obviously bring another organization in, like a Big Four, to help you drive that kind of awareness as well. But one of the things that I do advocate for a lot is, in every major city and town and country around the world, you'll have cybersecurity in the police authorities or head of cybercrime. They love coming to organizations and talking to senior leaders about the importance of cyber criminals and cybercrime and things like that. So that's another great way to bring in an external advisor, usually for free, because they're quite happy to come in, and they elevate your profile. There does come a point, by the way, Lav, after you've done all these things and you've still not managed to get the attention through all this activity of the board and the senior leader, there clearly is no interest. At that point, you do have to make a decision, quite frankly, whether you want to work for an organization that takes cybersecurity seriously or not. And I tell a lot of my students this in all the programs that we do. You can do all these great things that we teach you, and you put them all into practice, and you still don't get the engagement. You really are there as a scapegoat and not somebody to deliver a security program that's going to reduce risk over the long term. And unfortunately, that is the case. Sometimes you're kind of brought in as the person that looks like we do security. We've got somebody who does it, but they're not necessarily there to make meaningful change because they've not got the investment. There are, fortunately, less and less of those situations. I do occasionally hear it from some of our students. Some of the practices that they put in place do stop that, but for me, that's a difficult one. But again, if you do the right things, make it personal, do the things early enough, get your quick wins, you can get their attention.
Makes sense. No, and then if you don't have the buy-in of leadership, then yeah, the question does come up. Are you just a lightning rod and that's it? And probably absolutely not a good place to be. There's a comment in the chat, or perhaps a question. Can you share some anecdotes of potential issues that have been identified through using human risk intelligence? Whether it's through the OutThink platform or any other human risk intelligence that you can get. Maybe this might be one for Flavius, perhaps, but
yeah, I think so.
I don't know if you want to take a whack as well, but
I'm trying to think. Many stories come to mind. Here's one recent one, and you know, some of our large customers are really large. This company has about over 200,000 employees, and imagine now that's not a sort of a unit where everyone's in sync and everyone has the same level of risk understanding and the same level of knowledge and digital cyber literacy. Some of those companies, you have group companies, you have lots of products and services, and some of them have joined through mergers and acquisitions. So it's really diverse. And so the security team pushed out training, and one of the things they told people was, hey, when you work remotely, always use a VPN. Sound advice. Now, because they're able to automate listening and there's machine learning, natural language processing, aggregating that data, the comments people put in and surface the insights, what the customer was able to understand, they were able to identify this area of the business where people said, ooh, a VPN. We've been getting conflicting advice. That's the term they use, conflicting advice. And that was great for the security team because they knew exactly where to go spend a bit of time to ask the right questions, conflicting advice. Oh, interesting. Here's the group security policy and what sort of advice have you been getting, and then be able to bring those people, you know, onto the right processes and policies and even guide them, give them specific guidance on, hey, look, in this company, here's how you get a VPN and here's how you use it and here's why it's important to use it. Now, you can easily imagine how in the absence of such intelligence or the ability to automate listening and a two-way conversation, how that would have played out. You push out a funny video, maybe some people watch the video, maybe some people skip the video. You think you've trained everyone because you look at the results at the end of that training campaign, over 97% completed. It even gives that security team a false sense of, hey, we've trained everyone, we must be secure. And then the next thing you know, those people were never going to use a VPN. Maybe they connect to a public Wi-Fi in an airport trying to get the job done. Maybe someone steals some credentials and you have a breach on your hands. That's a recent story. I have many, but I don't think we have the time for me to go through all of the stories. So.
No, that's a good one, and it points to technology being a scale agent, and yet another way of 200,000 people getting that kind of feedback at that kind of scale, of course, is difficult without having some sort of automation to grind through that. So yeah, to your point about time, we are kind of getting close to the top of the hour. I just want to finish us off with one last point. If you can comment on where you see human risk management, cyber human risk management evolving. What do you think is going to be sort of the next frontier of innovation and capability in this space?
I'll mention what I think it is, but then Flavius is probably going to give you the answer. I think the obvious thing is artificial intelligence. That's obviously where we're seeing the change right now. Generative AI obviously used a lot. It can be used obviously for intent as well. It can be used in a bad way through bad actors and everything else. So we have to be on the front foot knowing that this is happening at scale now. And then also how you respond and automate your tools to be able to respond to what's coming your way. So you're going to see this warfare, if you like, of AI. And to be honest, in the middle of that, you're going to need humans to be part of that decision-making process, because you kind of want a human in the middle a little bit to be able to kind of decipher whether these things are real or not. So that's just generally what you're going to need. But there'll be a large degree of automation that you'll get, because cost savings will continue to be a big factor. But for platforms like OutThink, I don't know, you're probably already thinking about this, and I would suspect there's already a degree of artificial intelligence already being used in the platform. We didn't have any when we were building it, obviously, Flavius. It wasn't a thing back then, but yeah. I know you've moved on a lot since then.
Yeah, I guess absolutely, the points you just made there, and absolutely. And you want to have a human in the middle there, an engaged human with the right understanding of cyber risk and the right level of cyber skills and behaviors to mitigate those threats. So how do you get that engaged human in the middle? Well, and this is, I think, what AI is going to bring to us. We have this vision as a company to secure digital life everywhere. This is our enduring vision. And so we're already seeing the convergence of the old analog world and this new digital world. A lot of reliance on digital services for really, really serious things, not just social networks, but work, healthcare, education, your finances. And that's a one-way street. That's only going to increase. So whatever digital life is going to look in this new phase of evolution, I want OutThink's to be the company securing that digital life in that future. And then it's not just about enterprise. I think someone said it quite well. These days we're no longer just securing computers, we're securing society. And that's absolutely it. So then how? Well, we got to be able to deliver a highly intelligent system that's able to engage people and help them build those cyber skills, which I see as digital skills for the 21st century. And that cannot be done with spreadsheets. That cannot be done with pen and paper. AI is going to aid tremendously at building that system. And earlier, I mentioned 100 million potential human risk portraits. Without AI, we can't even count to 100 million, right? Let alone map those portraits and engage people in the most effective way with the most relevant piece of cyber guidance and knowledge and training.
That makes sense. Just any last, I don't know if you want to make any comments, Flavius, about how things have been going this year with human risk management and for OutThink, and kind of taking the place of some of the legacy approaches of just doing posters and one-way training.
Look, I'll say this. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us all as an industry to tackle the bulk of what makes those security breaches, right? How great is that? how many times do you have the opportunity to go after the 80 to 90% of something, of anything? And this is exactly what we're doing here with cybersecurity, human risk management. And the great thing is when we go out and we engage with customers and we work with all of these brilliant security teams and security leaders, what we see is there's this desire to really go beyond legacy security awareness training, funny videos, and monthly phishing simulations. So yeah, a lot of enthusiasm, this burning desire to evolve and take advantage of this opportunity. I'll stop there. I think that that's pretty much what we're seeing in the industry these days, and it's really really great to be in this space and be able to work with these brilliant security teams. As you know, Lev, we do a lot of co-building with our customers, and that's why how these great solutions end up in the product. Sure, Darren and I and the other CISOs that started OutThink, we had some ideas, we had an idea or two. But then when we go engage with all of these security teams, you know, really, really good things happen.
Well, and I think Darren made a very good point earlier about if there isn't a need for something, if you're not solving some problem that you have as a CISO likely, then yeah, it's not worth doing. So, all right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much, both of you, for spending the time and kind of going back through the memories of how things have evolved and where the human risk management concept comes from.
Yeah, we were the first. We said it first. I think we'll have to check. We'll have to check check Wikipedia. I don't know where it is somewhere, but we definitely said it first.
I think it's Internet World Archive. If you go look for OutThink or Cyber Human Risk Management in the Internet World Archive, it's archived. You should go into Wikipedia. Maybe you're going to build us a page, like a wiki page.
Yeah.
There you go. Very good. Well, thank you for the work that you're both doing on this front, and for, of course, spending the time to talk to us about it here. So
thank you.
All right.
Pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, I think we're good, and we're done for today. So
thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.